This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Loose on the Lead. I'm Seth Merrill from Equidaily.com, and who's next to me? It's been 3 weeks, but he's back.
Is it that long?
Yeah, we've missed you.
Very kind of you.
It was that long to us. It was
well.
Steve Vick from Sirius and XM's At the Races, and we're in despite the fact that clocks went forward today, spring forward, fall back, lost an hour of sleep last night.
Well, you've had to be here for a while. You wouldn't think that hour would throw you off, but it does. It gets you out of whack. I'm driving down this morning, and I see I got to change the digital read on the clock on the car. So I go to push the button, and it says PM, and I'm thinking, oh, I got to let it go all the way around. 90, I get it to 9:05 a.m. Then I'm thinking to myself, AM, PM on the car clock. If you don't know that it's 9:05 a.m. versus 9:05 p.m. in the car, you shouldn't be driving. Just a theory, right? Am I nuts? AM, PM on the car clock?
Yeah, that's just
Seriously?
Yeah, that's very good.
Right?
You're
who are these people that put AM, PM in the car clock?
It's crazy. Very good.
It popped in my head. It's one of those,
No, you're onto something. You're onto something there. They could save a little money getting rid of the AM PM. Plenty of racing news and plenty of racing action. We'll talk about all of that this morning, but let's hit on some of the news over the past couple of days. The Hall of Fame nominees for 2014 were announced: 4 jockeys, 4 thoroughbreds, 2 trainers. The jockeys Chris Antley, Garrett Gomez, Craig Perrette, and Alex Solis. The thoroughbreds Shadow, Curlin, Kona Gold, and Extra Heat. And the trainers Steve Asmussen and Gary Jones. They are the 2014 nominees. I think it's an interesting bunch of humans and equine athletes as well.
The 4 top vote getters will go into the hall, and of course, when it comes to the jocks, these are all jocks that have been nominated at one time or another. I happen to be a bit of a Craig Perrette fan, a guy who I think is highly underrated and underappreciated. There's, of course, people that are huge fans of Antley and think he deserves to get in. And then, of course, Alex Solis, kind of a quiet veteran and someone who's had just a consistent career. It is interesting that 3 of these 4 have had various lifestyle issues that affected their career and, of course, robbed Antley of his life prematurely. When it comes to the horses, it sure feels like a Shadow and Curlin will be drop kicks at this point. And I know Jack Wolf from Starlight and Don Lucarelli very eager to get a Shadow in. Extra Heat is deserving. And then what do you do about Steve Asmussen? First time on the ballot. You'd have to think that Asmussen is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Gary Jones, a guy that is particularly legendary, but seems like somebody who is very West Coast aware as opposed to kind of the national understanding of what a wonderful horse trainer he was and his accomplishments. So we'll see where this goes. You could see potentially Asmussen and 3 horses and no jocks. I mean, that wouldn't surprise.
Yeah, again, Hall of Fame voters can vote for as many as they want, but it's the top 4 vote getters that will get in. But regardless, it seems like it's going to be a pretty good class. I think they're all pretty solid.
There's one sentiment out there that continues to more or less fester, and that is the fact that King Leatherbury continues to be ignored even as a nominee. And it is a gross injustice to someone who is one of the winningest trainers in racing history, a guy who has been an absolute institution in the Mid-Atlantic. And it is really, at this point, something that needs to be addressed, and I think a push needs to be put on to at least acknowledge with some presence on the ballot of King Leatherbury's tremendous career and life in the game. And Mario Pino, another guy that seems to be kind of glossed over when it comes to at least the nomination process. I mean, if Alex Solis is going to be a regular have a regular appearance on this ballot, where's Mario Pino? With 6,000, almost 7,000 wins? There's a couple of things that need to be, I think, pushed in here when it comes to the Hall of Fame.
And that's been kind of a theme going back for whatever, the kind of B-level circuits maybe don't get the respect they deserve. To me, Russell Bays there was some controversy there. I think when you ride at a level some of these guys ride at or train like King Leatherbury does, I just don't think you can ignore that. And you bring up Leatherbury, it's funny because you would think he would have been a little more prominent now that Ben's Cat has really put him out there over the past year or so. Could have put his name out there a little bit more. All right, going back to last week, and I mentioned this before these numbers came out on Racing Across America, the beginning of last week, before the national handle numbers came out. I said, expect them out in the next couple of days, the February numbers. And I said, you see during the year, race meets will end and the handle numbers will be down. They'll point to some weather issues, and you kind of scratch your head and say, gee, the weather wasn't that bad. But I said, these national numbers, they're going to be down, and it will be due to the weather. The weather was so freaky in February, and certainly the numbers reflected that. The numbers all went down between, 4 and 5%, February 14 going back to February 13. So, it was a notable dip. But I think it's absolutely legitimate this year to point at the weather. It really affected racing across the country, and in places where race dates weren't necessarily canceled. You had places like Fairgrounds where they lost turf racing. Field size shrunk. That certainly affected handle. So I think it's legitimate to point to the weather as a factor in February.
No doubt, and all you got to do is look forward to the March numbers, considering that yesterday at Santa Anita, they only handled $23 million. When the racing is right and everything comes together, and you get the scenario that particularly that you've had at the major venues each weekend, those numbers will take care of themselves.
And I also think February numbers were helped, and things will continue to be helped too. That the Rainbow Six continues to knock it out of the park down there at Gulfstream.
2.6 million into today.
They're popping in, and I continue to say you got to jump into that bet at the 20-cent increment. I've been 5 or 6 3 times over the last couple of weeks with tickets that have costed anywhere from $30 to $40, and I've said at the 20-cent increment, if I was playing the normal pick 6. These would be $300 or $400 tickets. That's too deep for my pocket, but I can jump in and put in as many combinations now as the whales for 20 cents. And with that consolation payoff coming out of that pool, now it's they're absolutely legitimate.
And the consolation is the key. And there's people, there are some people out there that continue to say, oh, you shouldn't play it until the end, until they're forcing the distribution. There's too many prominent players and people that are serious about play that are going ahead and playing it on a daily basis. So, those that are maintaining that you're an idiot if you play this, I don't buy it at this point, because you're looking at typical payouts anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 on a daily basis. And when you figure out what you're getting in terms of 15 to 1, 20 to 1, 60 to 1 for your money, it just seems like it's reasonable. And even with what feels like an onerous takeout, we've been making the point, even Andy Beyer with me on the radio 2 weeks ago, even Beyer acknowledged, because people are using the increment to cover some outlandish combinations, the extra dead money in those plays helps offset what the takeout hawks are calling a ridiculous bet. That ridiculous takeout is really negated to a large extent by all the dead money that's in there. And so that's why you're getting parlay, being twice payouts of 2 and 3 times the parlay. It's worth trying, and at the very least, it helps you figure out how to approach pick sixes for a reasonable amount of money. As Seth says, I've been putting together the same kind of bets, 28.80, up to about 48.80, in that range. And it helps you with your pick six ticket structure and understanding where to trim. So when you want to play serious pick six tickets, it's a very good exercise, I think. And I've sort of converted after being one of the people who thought this is a fool's errand.
But I think it's a completely different bet the beginning to when they get up
Right,
to 600
to
or
this
700.
point,
And
yes.
I think people don't understand, and let me just say it again. What happens is the consolation is paid out of the pool, the money that is put in that day. But the consolation is 70% of that. At this point, chasing that $2 million, they're putting in $400,000 or $500,000 a day.
Every day.
So you're playing
Yep.
for a $300,000 pool with a 20-cent bet. A $300,000 pool in a pick six bet would be very attractive. Now we're talking about jumping in at 20 cents. So I think some people just look at the bet the way at the beginning, I'm not jumping in either, but it's totally different now that they've gotten up to this level.
And let me, just for a second, because we can look at this from yesterday. Take a look at this sequence, because granted, Palace Malice had to absolutely gut out a phenomenal win here, and it looked like he was absolutely dead in the water 30 yards out. But Palace Malice at $1.30 to 1, and then in the nightcap, Golden Rifle, the Stronach, was more or less a slam dunk at just over even money. So a sequence of 6 races, you've got an absolute, 2 absolute even money shots that you could be narrow with. Toasting, Our Free Roll, and Unlimited Budget. You probably had to cover all 3 in that weird Florida bred allowance. Picosa was 4 to 5 in the 8th race. All you had to really come up with was Demander in that deep maiden special weight with Ian Wilkes, the second-time starter that paid a big price, paid $63.60. That horse was certainly a C. If this had been a pick 5, Demander was a C horse that you had to be a little scared about, but that's what the 20-cent sequence payout does for you. Now, take a look at this. They bet $700,000 into this pool. $700,000. With 3 even money shots, a 4 to 5 and 2 even monies, and then a little bit of coverage in the race with Unlimited Budget and Our Free Roll and Toasting, and then you had to spread wide at Demander, and then I forget the other horse, was I think a fairly reasonable, was a turf winner that was fairly approachable. The thing paid $3,118, and I mean, you're getting a lot of bang here for the buck.
Yeah.
It's just, I know that it seems daunting on a daily basis, but I'm a convert here to this.
Yeah, I as am I. But once it got to about 600,000, there have been a couple of days I looked, and the sequence to me was just too much of a skull buster.
Well, those are the days that the jackpot could fall. Those
Yeah.
are the people are saying, oh, it's impossible. Yeah, it's impossible. So just forego
And again,
that.
That's a great point too. What we're talking about here is what I'm talking about.
Forget the jackpot.
I'm not chasing the jackpot.
No,
I'm chasing the consolation.
Exactly.
I know I'm not. My ticket is logical
Exactly.
enough. I don't have a chance at that.
Exactly.
So you're chasing the consolation. It's a whole different mindset.
Exactly.
All right. Some of the other news over the past week, and we'll talk about this. We have Dave Grenning coming on later, and certainly we'll touch on it with him. But there was a New York board meeting this past Wednesday. Some significant news came out of that in that they're taking a look at Aqueduct and the situation with Aqueduct. I drove in on Thursday morning, and Anthony Bonomo, a board member, was on with Paul Vandenberg on the radio talking a little bit about the board meeting and the fact that Aqueduct and the future Aqueduct is just kind of up in the air, so they don't know how much money to invest in that facility until they really know what the future is. And a lot of the board meeting was kind of maybe coming up with a plan for the next couple of years and really looking and deciding what to do with Aqueduct. They also made some announcements about Belmont and Saratoga, kicking up the admission prices there. And I thought one of the most notable things was they're closing the Belmont Grandstand.
Yeah, and we'll talk to Dave Grenig about that at the second and third floors, and we'll see what else Dave knows and what Dave's thoughts are. The attacks on on Aqueduct, boy, they sure feel coordinated and as if they're trying to manufacture any variety of issues. There were those robberies that was seemingly and allegedly the work of some of the unions that are at odds with both Genting and with NYRA. There's just almost too many odd salvos in this direction. And I was there last week for the Gotham. I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, the public areas are absolutely fine. I mean, this dangerous. It's funny. Dangerous. How come the 7 or 8 robberies at gunpoint in the Genting parking lot on the casino side? How come those aren't on the front page of the Daily News and the New York Post? How come? There's been, I think, 7 or 8 armed robberies on the casino. But somehow that's escaped the headlines. Why would that be? How is it that that's? What's your theory?
And I'll also say that there's been this theme over the past few months of Aqueduct, dirty, unkempt, uncared for, and Alan Mann, who does the Left at the Gate blog, he put up a nice blog last week, and I've got it linked, where he took some photographs of the public areas, and they're fresh, and they look
bizarre.
like they've done a great job. And of course, there's the beautiful murals they have down there now.
I don't get it. I know that a certain member of the well, it's not really a media member. He's got a blog now on the internet, like many. Was all up in arms about the pigeons and the outlandish pigeons. What goes on? What goes on behind the scenes that isn't in the public view? When you're down in the bowels of Aqueduct. Yeah, is it an aging facility? I love these lines from some politicians around the city. Return Aqueduct to its glory. Wait a minute. This was never a glorious racetrack. It was always a utilitarian inner city facility. It was never some sumptuous racetrack. I mean, it's like this preposterous image that never really existed. Belmont is a different story. I mean, Belmont is America's ascot and always has been. Aqueduct was a concrete and steel, sort of like those 70s baseball and football stadiums. The utilitarian multi-use facility that was Three Rivers and Riverfront and the Veteran Stadium in Philadelphia. There was nothing sumptuous and glorious ever about Aqueduct. It was always meant as a more or less an off-season facility from November to April. Who's kidding who? I mean, it's like this image of something that never existed. It's like the full fields of the days gone by. Full fields of days gone by. Go pull yourself out some programs from the 70s and 80s with plenty of 5- and 6-horse fields then.
That is funny.
Joke.
If you leaf through the Champions book.
Unbelievable.
But just before we move away from NYRA, they also announced there will be some capital improvements they're
whole
committing
bunch.
to. So that's good news too. A lot of those coming up at Saratoga. You'll see some high definition televisions out in the backyard, sound, video wall. Trackus, of course, will be up at Saratoga this summer. They're going to upgrade the children playground area as well, and do some other things to Saratoga and some of the other NYRA tracks. So good news there. Also, we were talking before we went on air. There were some articles, some commentary, and whatnot that were interesting over the past week. Andy Beyer wrote an article, talked a little bit about. It was an interesting article. Talked a little bit about. The racing industry always talks about how steep the learning curve is as compared to walking into a casino and just pulling the arm on the slot machine. But the racing industry just isn't doing a whole lot to address that steep learning curve when they make the conditions they make now. And Beyer in the article wrote about And I've done the same thing. Over the years, you go into the track and you explain basically the claiming game and allowance, and you'd have it covered. But now with the conditions, and he had a great one from Santa Anita that needed footnotes. It was so long, and the game has changed there. And he also talked about distances and run-ups and how that's confusing. And that's confusing not only to neophytes, that's confusing to people who have been around the game for a long time. But it was an interesting article from Beyer.
Well, Andy wrote this piece, Racing Industry Keeps Horse Players Off Balance. Then there was the column in thoroughbredracing.com, Charlie Hayward's outstanding new website. That came from Stu Kirschenbaum, who has a shelf full of sports Emmys as a producer and has produced a lot of Major League Baseball, did This Week in Baseball for years, and is one of the most respected producers around the game, around any sport game at all. Stu Kirschenbaum was on with me, too, on the radio. Then there was Joe Applebaum, wrote a piece in Thoroughbred Daily News about data power, and these all kind of intersect, because Kirschenbaum was talking about the way in which the Jockey Club and the Fox Sports 1 programming, what their goals need to be and what their execution is going to attempt. Why do we want to be on TV? What are our goals? How does the investment benefit the game short and long term? And then there was the Applebaum piece in TDN that talked about all the information, unlocking all the power of statistics that are available for the game that frankly, the Jockey Club is in control of and has their vice grip on. Equibase and all of the products that could be coming out of Jockey Club and making that more available to players on a wider basis. And he uses the NBA and the website that they put together, stats.nba.com, which gave basically all the inside information to the players. And then here was Andy talking about a similar topic, and that is the unintentional obfuscation of things like run-ups. And at Gulfstream, on a single day, you may have the gate positioned 30 feet away from the seeing eye or 100 feet. And so all of a sudden, a race that's supposedly 7.5 furlongs on the grass, really, it's a mile. And so, how does that affect your handicapping? The reason they do that, of course, is because they don't want to put the gate in the same place over and over and over again and wear a path on the grass courses, on the inner and the outer. They use, of course, the two configurations. They've got the temporary rails that can be at 36 and 108, 48 and 120, or down to 0 and 48. So there's a lot of little nuances, and this is all good discussion, Seth, across the board. And I thought it provoked a lot of fairly heady conversation as opposed to the usual malevolent nonsense that we get. And I thought, if you haven't seen these pieces, I think most of them are, maybe the TDN thing just came out, so maybe...
Yeah, the other ones definitely were linked.
Yeah, maybe put a conversation grid together on Equidale.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we will head to our first break. Coming up, Steve Haskin from the Blood Horse and Dave Grenig from the Daily Racing Forum. We'll certainly hit on some of the stakes action from yesterday. A really nice day of racing. All of that when Loose on the Lead continues. Stay tuned.
This is Steve Beck. Join me Tuesday through Saturday here on OTB TV for At the Races, my Sirius XM daily news magazine of the thoroughbred industry. Handicapping, interviews, analysis, everything you could want. 6 a.m. OTB TV.
Go Zephyr kicking clear, and Go Zephyr is pulling away impressively.
Hysterical Lady Ginger Punch to win it.
And it's Wilco in front, and he's going to pull off a huge upset here.
But it's Round Pond going on to take the distaff.
Awesome again. Sire of 10 Grade 1 winners, 4 Breeders' Cup champions, and 4 multimillionaires, standing at Adena Springs.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what can be better than that? How about 2 stadium cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTV.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTV.com. Log on today.
We're back on Loose on the Lead on this Sunday morning. An absolutely glorious day of racing yesterday across the country and actually across the globe, of course, because Dubai with the Super Saturday card got things rolling. It rolled right into the East Coast, Gulfstream and Tampa in particular, and then out to California. The 3-year-olds were on display with the Tampa Bay Derby, and then later the San Felipe, and then, of course, the handicap division, a big performance from Palace Malice. Later, of course, the incredible matchup in the big cap. Steve Haskin of the Blood Horse joins us to go through all of the great action. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Outstanding,
Very
Steve.
good.
And we saw a terrific weekend, weekend still going, of course, but we have an absolutely brilliant Saturday, start to finish. And it started with the return of one of your favorite horses from last year, Palace Malice.
Yeah, I mean, how game was that? I mean, that was I thought he was beaten, and I said, all right, well, he's coming back off a layoff. He was under, pressure the whole way. So if he gets beat in the race and he gets beat a half a length or 3/4, I was surprised at who looked like he was going to win the race at the head of the stretch. But he had put everybody else away, and I just thought that for him to come back the way he did, I actually thought Golden Ticket was going to be pretty tough in there. When that horse runs his race, he's right there, and it looked like he had that race won. It's not like he came back on a horse that was tiring. First of all, he came back on a horse that looked like he was going to rally and win the race, and then came back on another horse that was rallying for even farther back that looked like he was going to win the race. And for him to come back and run a mile, I know the track was fast everywhere you looked yesterday. Florida and California. But for him to come back that way off that layoff and go a mile in 1:33 and 4, that's a good horse, I'll tell you. He just, I think he just put himself in the Met Mile category, which I don't know if Fletcher was even thinking about that when you think about a Belmont winner. But after this race, he looked like he can run with anybody at any distance. He always showed brilliance.
No doubt about it. And I think, for those that are saying, the track, well, wait a minute. If the track and if the inside was so terrific, how is it that It's My Lucky Day basically flattened out in the stretch? It looked like It's My Lucky Day had that inside track off the turn. We just watched the video, Steve, and yet, he couldn't go on with the leaders. So the horse is rallying from outside. Absolutely. I mean, what Golden Ticket? People are saying, the racetrack. Golden Ticket came from 6 lengths back. And then what about, you also had Demander for Ian Wilkes earlier in the day come from like 8 lengths off to win. So I don't want to hear that, the track carried Palace Malice. That's nonsense. John Velasquez really went to work on him, and he dug in. I thought it was a tremendous performance.
Well, I look at him compared to It's My Lucky Day because they're both coming off layoffs. It's My Lucky Day, obviously a longer layoff by several months, but still, both of them coming off layoffs. And It's My Lucky Day, I mean, he ran okay. He just got absolutely drilled and run into the ground. I mean, when you go 7 furlongs in 1:21.1, I mean, I don't care what the condition of the track is. 1:21.1, and you're coming off a long layoff, and then you come back again in a final 8 and 12 and 2 after running an 8 and 12 flat. I mean, that was I just thought it was an absolutely brilliant performance. I mean, I couldn't be happier. I'll tell you one thing. this year looks pretty awesome for older horses.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
really,
the biggest.
the handicap division is solid.
That's the biggest beneficiary, no doubt. Let's turn to Tampa, and we get to the Tampa Bay Derby. And you know, in the final analysis, Steve, this may not be the greatest group, a 94 buyer for Ring Weekend, but certainly a good follow-up performance to his first dirt effort, which was his maiden win, and Graham Motion and the connections here, West Point and St. Elias, kind of a nice story. Daniel Centeno, a perennial leader in the jockey colony at Tampa. Talk about your Tampa Bay Derby impressions.
Well, the main thing here is that the fact that this horse is getting good. He is undefeated, on the dirt this year, and his races last year on the dirt were okay, other than his first start, where he did run a pretty good third in his second start at Churchill Downs. So the fact that he's won both of his starts this year, and the fact that Graham Motion, he had other places he could have gone with him. The fact that he wanted to go here really bodes well for his chances. Did I like him in the race? No, I didn't like him in the race. I'm surprised he won the way he did. Horse had really never showed actually that kind of speed before to open up on the field. But again, he's a gelding, and horses get good at this time of the year, and sometimes they surprise everybody, including their own trainers and owners. But I don't think Graham Motion was that shocked over the fact that he won the race. But is he a Derby horse? I don't know. It's pretty early to tell. The way horses are dropping like flies right now. I mean, anybody can be a Derby horse right now. All you have to do is get there.
Well, one thing about this win, I thought, Steve, that was interesting. Centeno is the story here because he seized control of this race. This is not a horse that was going to figure to be on the lead every step of the way, and you got to give Centeno tremendous credit. This is a horse that can rate very comfortably. He's a tappet. This was another good forward move, and so
I think on the backstretch you had to feel he was going to come back to the field, and he never did. I like the aggressive move.
He was going very comfortably.
Exactly. That's what happened. Everybody let him alone. But if you break it down, if you watch his last start, he breaks from the 10 hole going a mile and a 16th and gets caught 5 wide going into the turn and makes a steady move on the outside to get the lead and, holds on pretty gamely when he's challenged in the stretch. That was his first start, coming off a turf race. And you just have to think that, listen, maybe he's finding his niche. Again, I don't know if he's a Derby horse. You know me, to me, anything that has to do with John Nehru or Fapiano, and I've been writing columns about the influence of Fapiano this year. Well, this horse is inbred to Fapiano. So what else is there? Every horse that comes along right now has got Fapiano in his pedigree. So I don't see there's absolutely no reason why this horse is not going to go long. If I tap it out of a Crypto Clarence mare, so distance is not a question. It's a question of who he beat and how good he is, how good he is stacked up against these other horses. And let's see where Graham Motion decides to go with him. I mean, he's done well in the Wood Memorial, so we'll see if he sends him up to New York or maybe sends him to Oakland.
Terry Finley said after the race that they were actually looking at the private terms, and Graham Motion called him up and said, "Let's take a shot with the Tampa Bay Derby."
Right. I read that. Yeah.
And then also they said after the race that Alan Garcia, who had ridden him last time, was out. Was he over in Dubai? They said he was out of the country.
He was.
That's why Centeno got the ride.
Well, and good.
I'll tell you something. I tell you something. I don't know if he would have won the private terms because the horse that won is the horse I really like. Kid Cruz made a run.
Talk about that, Steve.
18 lengths out of it. I mean. I saw this horse's last race, and I was really impressed. And this is yet another. This is the third 3-year-old stakes winner bred by Macklemore Hall this year. They also had the runner-up. They also bred the runner-up in this race, and also Intense Holiday. So between having these two horses and Vince Ramos, so three stakes winners this year. So. This horse, and I really like that last race. The horse got a huge closing kick, and he's really gotten good right now. He's still lightly raced. Well, when I saw how far back he was, I mean, we're talking, the charts had 18 lengths. I was looking certainly, let's say 20 lengths back or so. That horse was like a wild maniac coming around the turn. And what happened is that he turns to the stretch And he is flying. He's so flying that his body is like at a 45-degree angle coming into the stretch, and the horse drifts right into his path, and he decides the horse is going to go to the inside. The horse keeps drifting in, and he switches to the outside. And my goodness, and he sticks on his left lead, and then he finally changes into his right lead, and just explodes and blows what looked like a pretty good field away to win by 4. Who knows? I don't know how good this horse is. But, some people can say, oh, the time was horrible. That track was dead. If you look at the times of the races of that day, don't go by times at all. Forget about it. But this horse is a very sneaky up-and-comer, so I'm not so sure that the Ring Weekend would have won this race.
Well, and this is a Lemon Drop Kid out of A Tale of the Cat Mare, Larry Bell.
And we're talking Kid Cruz in the private terms yesterday for Linda Rice.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Steve, let's...
Now, the thing is, I don't know. To me, the big question mark is what to do with Conquest Titan. I was disappointed where he finished and that he didn't really put in much of a run, and then he couldn't pass the 2 Pletcher horses to get second in the race. The only thing I could say is that it looked as if he really was one of those horses that was not handling that Tampa surface. So do you give him another chance? Or you say, well, he's not quite good enough? I think you have to give him another chance off the Holy Bull. But it was kind of disappointing because now he's in desperate need of points. And I just think Cassie was, between a rock and a hard place because he wasn't going to finish much better than 4th if he had gone in the Fountain of Youth. But I think he was obviously hoping for a better finish this time.
Well, let's talk about what we saw in California. We'll stay on the 3-year-olds and talk about a incredibly dominant effort here from California Chrome, the lucky pulpit of Art Sherman. And this is one of those nice stories, Steve. You can already anticipate it. In fact, we talked about it on Thursday on the radio, that this is kind of the veteran horseman story that people will gravitate toward. But this is a serious horse. We're going to watch here the San Felipe, same kind of thing, a horse on the lead being just let out, and then just spurts away and pours it on down the stretch. A 107 buyer to put him as the 3-year-old leader in the clubhouse.
Well, first of all, if you're going to knock the horse for going to the lead on on what looks like a speed favoring track, forget about it. That's number one. That's not his running style. Number 2, he was fractious in the gate. He just wanted out of there, and he basically pretty much outbroke the field. I mean, he almost broke through the gate in another second. He came charging out of there, and he wound up on the lead the way a good horse would wind up on the lead, who's so much better than everybody else. But if you watch him going into the turn in that race, you watch Espinoza, his hands are way down on that horse's neck. That horse is doing everything on his own. He's not. I'll tell you one thing, by the way. You're watching this race, which is one of the reasons why I fell in love with him in the Cal Cup Derby, and even more so when I went back and watched the King Glorious, the race before that. This horse does nothing wrong. I mean, nothing. His style, his stride is so smooth. He runs as straight as any horse in memory. And if you watch the head-on, his legs are under him so perfectly. He doesn't deviate an inch off the track he's on, and that's even coming down the stretch. He changes lead so smoothly, you can't even see him do it. And he's got the acceleration at the exact time you want, at around the 5/16 pole. And I remember Lava Man, we mentioned that, because I like I mentioned on Thursday, I just fell in love with this horse the first time I saw him. And I didn't even know anything about him because I didn't follow his career earlier than that, running in those California-bred races. But I did go back and saw major excuses in the races that he lost, including one race where it looks like he had no excuse, but you can see in the head-on he gets whipped across the face in the stretch. But, I mean, you watch this horse and you say, this horse is just so much better than these other horses. He's in another class than these other horses. I mean, I don't know how Candy Boy's going to stack up against him, but I mean, to what he did to these horses, I just think he's in the class by himself.
You had him number 8 on your list last week. How much does he move up this week?
Well, I got to tell you guys, I'm very seriously considering putting him number 1.
I don't see why you wouldn't.
I looked at the Courier Journal poll, and nobody has him 1, and his consensus position is number 6. And I guess people just aren't sold quite yet because it's a mile and a 16th. You take a look at this horse's pedigree, by the way. This horse traces to so many not stamina influences, and I'm talking mile and a half stamina influences, top and bottom, mile and a quarter, mile and a half. I have no doubt. I mean, everybody's going to look, Not For Love, Broodmare side. Not For Love is a full brother to Rhythm, who won the Travers. You look at this horse's pedigree. There's stamina everywhere in here. But, I mean, I just think he's just a machine. He just does nothing wrong. I think one of the reasons, too, by the way, why he broke like that, I think being stabled at Los Alamitos, those quarter horses.
Well, Steve.
I think those quarter horses rubbed off on him coming out of the gate.
Well, Steve, increasingly, for those that are playing Santa Anita on a regular basis, there is the emerging story that surface at Los Al, that they had to expand that racetrack, of course, and widen the turns for the thoroughbred, the extended thoroughbred meet they're going to have. And a lot of horses that are based at Los Al that relocated from Hollywood. The Los Al horses are absolutely performing brilliantly at Santa Anita so far in this first month, and that's been, of course, a story we were watching. San Luis Rey getting a lot of relocation horses out of Hollywood as well. You talk about the influence. This is a homebred for these owners out of a mare that was a Maryland bred of Dr. Bowman's. Tom Bowman bred that mare, the Not For Love, Love to Chase. You talk about what? Polish numbers. Sir Ivor as a broodmare sire going 2 back, Vaguely Noble and Rebo, all of your favorites.
Exactly. I've got it all written down already. I mean, you're talking about an English Derby and a Washington D.C. International winner, an Arc de Triomphe winner, and a 2-time Arc de Triomphe winner. That's this horse's tail female family.
Wow.
And I know, if you're going to say anything negative as far as being a Derby horse, you could say that the 107 buyer and the way he won might have peaked too soon. And I've seen this before. There was a horse that people probably don't even remember who ran almost an identical kind of race back in the early in the 90s. Excuse me, in the early 2000s. Wayne Lucas had a horse named Consolidator.
Sure.
Who won the San Felipe in 140 flat and won by 6.5 lengths, absolutely destroying Giacomo in that race. And he came back and they, obviously got bet down in the Bluegrass Stakes and was trounced in the race and then never ran again. And a few years ago, we had this horse, Premier Pegasus.
Yep.
Who won by almost 8 lengths in
Mr.
141-1, and he never ran again after that.
Yeah.
So you always have to say, well, did he peak too early? I don't know with this horse. He's such a big, strong horse, and if you watch the race, Espinosa, he's geared down the last 16th of a mile. Unlike a horse like Consolidated, when he won, he was under a pretty stiff hand ride all the way to the wire. But this horse was geared down. I just don't know what's there. I mean, we don't know what we're dealing with here. Is he gotten that good? I just think right now, talent-wise, he's the most talented horse I've seen. I'm saying to myself, if I don't put him number 1, so what am I going to do? I'll move Cairo Prince up the same way everybody else has. So everybody will have Cairo Prince on top. And I still want to see. I want to see more. I want to see more. I'm looking for something special right now, and this horse is special.
I agree. I completely agree, Steve. And of course, you also have got, if you want to compare to San Felipe winners, the horse I think you compare to, and if you're Art Sherman and Perry and Coburn, you compare him hopefully to Creative Cause, and at least it has some forward. But don't forget, you had Medagliadoro win this race, and Point Given.
Point Given.
You had a bunch of Fusaichi Pegasus.
Fusaichi Pegasus, by the way, when he won the San Felipe, I had him number 1 on my list when he won the allowance race before the San Felipe. That's how impressive he was. In the San Felipe, he was unbelievable, and then comes back and wins the Wood Memorial and the Kentucky Derby. And if he was sound at all, that horse would have been an absolute superstar. But he was so screwed up in the head, and he was not sound anyway. Besides that, but Point Given used this race, comes back and romps in the Santa Anita Derby, and wins 2 legs of the Triple Crown. I mean, the San Felipe is a very good race. And like I said, Giacomo came out of this race, even though he was drilled by Consolidated. Consolidated just ran one of those absolute freaky races. This horse is not a freaky race because she's coming off of 2 freaky races. And you know what I loved about this horse, which I mentioned originally? in his horse's last 2 races, on the thoroughbred, he paired one.
Paired ones, and this is going to be a forward move too.
Nobody's even come close to ones.
No.
These horses are running 5s and 6s all year. He pairs a 1.
Yep. There's no doubt, Steve. I mean, this horse is the goods, and it also comes at a great time for California and Cal Breeding, for the Harris Farm and Lucky Pulpit, who stands for $2,500 and who's a very good, reliable sire. Steve, let's get to.
Well, let me just say one thing, by the way.
Real quick.
One day, somebody's going to ask Art Sherman how this horse compares to the best horse he's ever exercised, who is Swaps.
Oh, look at that. Nice. I love it. Everybody's rooting for Art Sherman out there. It would be just great. Let's quickly, Steve, we got a couple more minutes. Let's skip forward. We'll skip to San Carlos. Not a big deal for our conversation purposes.
That's a hell of a horse, though. Let me tell you, that is a hell of a horse.
Sahara Sky with a big effort. But, Steve, we got to talk about the big cap. We're going to watch it, hopefully, from the gate. We'll go to the Santa Anita Handicap. It was billed, of course, as a rematch between the 1-2 finishers in the Breeders' Cup. But Game On Dude, everybody knew he would get the lead in here, and then it was a question of when he was going to get confronted. Whatever confrontation, he doffed it and kept going.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, when this horse gets his way, and at first going into the turn, I said, "Uh-oh, he's going to be in trouble." When here the goats came up to run with him, but then Rosario just backed off, and once he backed off, and this horse had a clear lead, knowing what that this track was playing speed, then you see 45 and 1, you say, "Oh, I don't know," because a lot of times when you run that fast, and your the 2 main horses you have to beat are sitting right behind you, they're running almost as fast as you are. These horses are not used to running 45 and 2 and 45 and 3. That's why I have to say, I mean, I'm really happy for Game On Dude, because the horse was being knocked for what he's accomplished. It absolutely disturbing that people just absolutely knocked this horse. Oh, he beat nothing. Who the hell is Clubhouse Ride? And who the hell is Cattle Corn? You cannot knock what this horse has accomplished and when he runs his race. But I got to tell you, I really felt sorry again for Will Take Charge. Will Take Charge is opening up 8 lengths on the other horses in the race, and for the second race in a row, he runs into an absolute monster on the lead there that he's not going to be able to catch. I mean, here's how many times is a horse going to run a mile and a quarter, and 158 and 2 and get beat? It's incredible. I mean, they ran the mile in that race in 132 and 2. So I mean, poor horse, he has turned into such a good horse to finish 8 lengths ahead. And as far as Mucho Macho Man, you can see at the 3/8 ball he was dead. And it's funny because a lot of the people who watched his last work really did not like it at all, and a lot of people went off of him because of that work.
Yeah, we had both Kurt Hoover and Bob Ike on the show Friday, and both of them said they both watched it, and while the two of them both acknowledged that they're not Andy Harrington, they're not Gary Young, they both said that they did not like the way he looked. Now, at the same time, he's a horse that is a funny workhorse and is more of an afternoon glory than a morning glory. But clearly, some people thought that this was not his spot. When you talked and you heard Mike Smith, frankly, on the Fox broadcast, when Smith said that he thought that Game On Dude's coat looked better, that physically he looked like he was a lot better in this spot and was in a much better health, basically, and fitness level. Baffert kept saying, I think people just sort of shrugged it off when Baffert kept saying after the San Antonio that he had a short horse, that he didn't lean on him like he should have. And so, I think some people, like you said, there were people saying, oh, the horse is finished. How could the horse be finished when it was 90 days since he got beat ahead by Will Take Charge in the Clark? What would have happened in 90 days that was going to suddenly transform him to a has-been? I mean, that was a crazy concept. Steve, granted, he is a little one-dimensional. He does need to have things his own way. it is maybe a knock on him, you know, in terms of historic context, that he doesn't overcome adversity per se. But when things go his way, it's a throwdown, basically. You've got to get your head in front of him somehow, and nobody really does that when he's out on that lead.
He's reached a point in his career, and I think it's one of the reasons why Rosario backed off. He's reached a point where he's at least gained a reputation among the other jockeys, is that I don't want to go head and head with this horse. You know what I mean? Why am I going to sacrifice my horse to go head and head with him? If Hand the Ghost has a chance to finish second or third or even fourth in this race, I'm not going to go head and head with this horse. Because sure, I'll kill him maybe, but I'm going to kill myself. So he backed off, hoping that he can at least get a piece of it. And I think wherever this horse goes from now on, unless you put a rabbit in against him, I don't see anybody running with him. I mean, why? Why would you want to run with him? There's absolutely no reason to do so. And again, yeah, he's one-dimensional, but, you know, a lot of tremendous horses were one-dimensional that were tough to beat. You know, they all said Dr. Fager was one-dimensional. Well, the only way you're going to beat Dr. Fager is run a rabbit at him. And I think that's what's going to happen here. Other horses thought that they could crack him, like in his last start. They thought that they could crack him, and they did, but they cracked themselves too. And I don't think anybody's going to be willing to do that from now on. So, you know, I'd like to see it. Can you imagine him in a race with a horse like Lee and Will Take Charge and Mucho Macho Man and Palace Mallard? You know, I mean, there's so many brilliant horses around this year. I mean, you got to give the other horses, even Mucho Macho Man, another shot. I mean, I saw the tail end of that work when he came into the stretch, when he went wide like that. But the thing is, you could see that he was definitely looking at something in the infield. It's not like he was unsound or anything. He was looking, he was gawking at something in the infield, and I think he just lost his focus. But a lot of people just did not like that work. Now, I can't say that's why he ran poorly. He ran back to his work. I just, you know, he might have run poorly because I think they might have just run too fast for him.
Yeah, no, you could see on the turn that he was having the heart kind of taken out of him when he could not range up and get even and get his head on a level with Game On Dude. That was over. And Smith, you know, for those that are always knocking Mike Smith when he doesn't win, this thing was an absolute tour de force for him. Steve, a phenomenal Saturday. Things continue to build the momentum across all the divisions. Handicap 3-year-old. We didn't even talk about the fillies. Testarossa comes back big on the grass in the Florida Oaks. That was great. A lot of good things going on. We got Steve. We got to wrap, but we'll talk to you on radio this week.
All righty.
All right.
Take care.
Steve Haskin, everybody, and we'll stay right here because we're running out of racetrack. We'll turn around, welcome in the Daily Racing Forum's Dave Grenning.
Hello, how are you guys?
Dave, good morning, and lots to talk about. And in fact, another round of those exciting board meetings this week when it comes to tracking the NYRA Reorganization Board.
Yeah, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot got done. I didn't think at this particular meeting. You know, I think we all pretty much know that Aqueduct isn't in the greatest shape, and Len Riggio, who was a board member and the owner and breeder of Gotham Stakes winner Samrat, should have been the happiest person on the planet, or at least at the Aqueduct on Saturday, March 1st, and you know, because the horse won the Gotham. And he really wasn't. He said, you know, sitting in the equestrian dining room was a pretty sad experience for him and his party, and you know, it's just not a good place to be right now, and they have to figure out what they're going to do with Aqueduct and how they want to treat it.
And that seemed to be kind of the overarching theme of the meeting, and they're talking about now putting together a game plan for Aqueduct for the future.
Well, they have to put a game plan together for New York racing by next April, to submit it to the state. That's what this whole reorganization board was about. It was a short-term board, about 3 years, and maybe even less than that, for its existence. And 6 months before they're supposed to be ready to hand it over to somebody for reprivatization, which is October of 2015, they have to submit something to the state on how to move forward. And so in that proposal, a year from now, they will make a recommendation, whatever it may be. My personal feeling is it will be to, you know, get out of Aqueduct. But even if they do that, you're still going to be there at least 3 more years, in my opinion. The next year coming up, and then at least 2 years before you can transform Belmont into a winterized, you know, a track that can run 9 or 10 months a year. So I still think Aqueduct's going to be around for a minimum of 3 more years. And, you can't just let it fall apart.
And one of the things that came out of the meeting that I found kind of, head scratcher maybe, or notable, they announced as well as admission increase up at Saratoga. They were talking admission price at Belmont, and tied into that was the grandstand will be now closed at Belmont. Was that out of the blue, or had that been floating around?
I hadn't heard that, and let me try and clarify this. I think the first floor, at least portion of the first level, has to be open in order. You can't access the apron any other way. So I have to think that the first level, the ground level, is going to be open to a certain point. It's just not going to be open all the way down to the top, to the top of the stretch. And I think, and again, this is what he said. He didn't really clarify this at any point in time. And these comments were made after the meeting. He didn't even really say this during the 90-minute plus meeting. He said to a few reporters afterwards, and I'm guessing that the second floor and third floor, that's really the area that's going to be closed, and there's going to be a minimal amount of ground on a minimal amount of grandstand area open on the first floor. I think that's their sort. Look, most except for a couple of days at Belmont, the place is pretty empty, and I think he just wants to put everybody into. He being Chris Kay, they want to put everybody into one area, which is going to be the clubhouse area, and it's sort of a way to raise admission without raising admission prices. It's $5 to get in the clubhouse. It's going to be $5. Just the people that wanted to pay $3 to go to the grandstand now have to pay $5.
Well, and in addition, Dave, when I've gotten a few inquiries on the radio show and by email, people wondering when their Saratoga ticket packages are going to be sent out, and when some of the decisions may be made in regards to the summer.
It's a great question, Steve. I don't know what the holdup is. I don't know why. It's March 10th tomorrow, and why haven't they announced the stake schedule for Saratoga? I don't know. I don't understand it. They have it. They just haven't released it. I don't know what the big secret is, and I guess. With price increases, they try to, I don't know, they try to be quiet about it and try and delay it. Look, it's happening. They're going to announce price increases at the Belmont Stakes. They haven't even announced that yet, and they want people to come. That's even closer, obviously, than the Saratoga meet. I don't know why they're not releasing it. I got to think within 3 weeks to a month, everything will be announced, but I don't know what the big secret is.
Meanwhile, let's hit a couple of notes on the racetrack. And yesterday, Oliver Zip, Kelly Breen, the nice City Zip colt, and wins the Capicella. And then meanwhile, Linda Rice goes down and has a big success in that private terms. Barati, not the story down at Laurel. Kid Cruz with an exciting rally. Linda, what was it? Yesterday was her 50th birthday or Friday? So
Friday? Yeah, Friday was her birthday. She turned 50 on Friday, and then she celebrated on Saturday with 3 wins, 2 at Aqueduct with a couple of old hard-knocking geldings in some claiming races. And a recent claim of hers, Kid Cruz, went down to Laurel, was about 20 lengths out of it down the backside, and won for fun. Looked like jumped in at the quarter pole, as Trevor would say. And it was a pretty impressive, visually, it was a pretty impressive performance. The type that, listening into their post-race interview that I guess Gabby Gaudet did with the owners, I think they have Belmont on their mind, Belmont Stakes. So, how they get there from here, I don't, remains to be seen. I guess something like the Peter Pan, but I would think that's the horse that they want to, the further the better. He certainly visually looked pretty impressive in that race.
We were talking earlier in the show, and of course, Sahara Sky gets himself back in the win column out in California, last year's Metropolitan Handicap winner. Then, of course, down at Gulfstream, hard not to think that the top 3 finishers yesterday in that mile Gulfstream Park Handicap, Palace Malice, who we know loves the surface, hard to believe that Pletcher and Dogwood won't think about the Met on their agenda.
Well, it's going to be an interesting dilemma for them. Not dilemma, but an interesting, dilemma, how they plan out the future. I mean, the Met Mile at $1.25 million is supposed to shape up as a tremendous race. And the way that Palace Malice ran yesterday and the Harris Sky, those are 2 excellent performances. A great comeback race, I thought, for Palace Malice, I thought was deep. The Harris Sky, I thought, had no chance at the quarter pole, and then Rosario at the magic. You got them outside, and of course, flows like a freight train. You also have Palace Malice, a race like the Brooklyn. If do they want to keep long or short, or they want to keep them at this distance, or they want to get them back out going around the ground. The Brooklyn's out there for them. It's not as lucrative, but it's out there. And then leading to the Whitney, which is supposed to be a big pot later in the summer. I mean, it could be a very interesting Met Mile if all these horses get there. But the Harris Guy, I'm still in awe of that performance.
Well, it was a fabulous Saturday, giving into Sunday, a big weekend. Dave, appreciate the news spotlight and the little racing conversation.
Okay, guys, anytime.
Dave Grenig of the Racing Form, and following up with Steve Askin of the Blood Horse as we cover the racing that was just spectacular. There's no other description for it.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the undercard at Tampa. We did touch on that Private Terms. That was a very nice race, so it's nice we got that into the conversation. Really nice day. And as you say, all around the world, we didn't touch that. There was a nice race in Australia, the Australia Cup Fiorente. Looks like he's going to turn out to be a star on the Australian scene now.
Look at you with just
absolutely
hitting all
I'm
those
like
international highlights.
All right, we'll wrap things up. Don't forget, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, looseonthelead@yahoo.com. We would love to hear from you, or pop over to the Facebook page as well. We're here every Sunday morning from 10 until 11 a.m. Seth Merrill, Equidaily.com. Steve Vick of Sirius and XM's At the Races. This has been Loose on the Lead. Again, we're here every Sunday morning, so we'll see you again next week. Have fun at the races this afternoon.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.